What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a minute to talk about week 9 of the NFL season, the official halfway point of the regular season. We typically try to stay away from gimmicky things on the podcast, but today we are going to hand out our midseason awards for MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, et cetera, et cetera. I know that that's kind of a stereotypical halfway through the season thing, but sometimes you got to play the hits, man. So we're going to have a conversation about who we think those awards should belong to so far and maybe look forward and think about who could potentially win them at the end of the season. We're going to talk about my no good, very bad fantasy week for all fantasy sports. Not a good week for me. And then wrap up with Scolds and Bolds from week 9 of the NFL season. Before we get to Matt, I wanted to mention I was reading an article right before we started recording about the Dame Giannis pairing in Milwaukee and how it has not taken the league by storm yet and what's wrong with Milwaukee and what's going on. It's been 6 games. And I know that when we have something new and exciting that we want it to be awesome right away. And Matt and I always joke on this podcast about how if you are not awesome right away, then you suck. And I think it's very relevant, not only for the NBA conversation this year, but also for a couple conversations we're going to have on this podcast today about guys like Bryce Young and other rookies who have not been amazing right away. Like, we're going to talk about CJ Stroud, who's just blown everybody away and been incredible this season. And his comparison kind of to Bryce Young and how Bryce has struggled so far this season. And that means that Carolina made the wrong pick and that they are going to regret this for the next 15 years and blah, blah, blah. And I think it's so funny, this culture we have of instant gratification where everything needs to be amazing right away or else it's a complete failure. I just wanted to preach patience, not only to the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young, but also to the Milwaukee fans and other people around the NBA who are freaking out because this pairing's not working. They've been playing together for 6 games. Cool it. It's an 82 game season in the NBA. Let me know where they're at game 56, game 64, game 72. Let me know where they're at when it matters. Not that their net rating is minus 5.66 games into the season for 2 guys who have never played together. It's absolutely ridiculous. But with that said, let's go get Matt. Let's talk about week 9 of the NFL season. Let's go. All right, Matt is here to talk about week 9 of the NFL season.
And teams that matter.
And teams that matter. We just talked for like 10 minutes pre-show about the New York Jets and their abysmal loss to I almost said San Diego Chargers, the LA Chargers last night in a game that I never should have bet on. I text Matt like 10 minutes before kickoff and I was like, I'm kind of feeling a Jets bet tonight. And he's like, do it.
Technically, I never said that. I just described what the logic would be.
Peer pressured me. I'm putting new rules for gambling in for myself. I'm not betting on bad football teams anymore. I'm only betting on teams that I know in my heart of hearts to be good. Because I was down big going into Sunday night football or going into like Sunday afternoon this week. And I had my biggest bets of the week on the Eagles -3 over the Cowboys and then the Bengals -1.5 over the Bills, which I called on this podcast last week and backed it up, put my money where my mouth was and made up all my losses and went a little bit ahead on those 2 games. And I was like, this is what I should just do every week, is just bet on the good teams to win and not mess with the Steelers and the Jets. I'm not going to bet on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish anymore. I'm only betting on like the Bengals, the Eagles, and the Lions. And that's it. No more. And I'm probably going to be rich by the end of the season.
It's a good call.
I was looking at the schedule for this week. There are games this week that I know that if I bet on them, I will lose. no matter what. Titans at Bucks, that's a nope. Saints at Vikings, nope-a-roni. Packers at Steelers, nope, thank you. And Atlanta, don't even fucking look at me with your minus 1.5 at Arizona. I'm not touching any of those games. I will lose money no matter which way I bet. So that's it for me. It's only good teams from here on out. It's like Eagles, Bengals, Lions, maybe the Chiefs. They got to prove it to me still.
That kind of should have been the strategy from the start.
It should have, but then I was sitting there last weekend and I was like, ooh, Steelers, Titans. Will Levis looked pretty good. Maybe I should sprinkle a little bit on that game. And it's like, there are just teams this year. It's like every year, but especially this year, there are teams where I know that if I bet on a game that they're involved in, I'm going to lose. And I just named them. It's like Steelers, Titans, Saints.
Mm-hmm.
None of that is going to go well for me. I'm staying away from these teams. I'm only betting on good teams, and I'm only betting on good teams with good quarterbacks. No more betting on Zach Wilson, 8 sacks, 2 fumbles, a pick. God, awful. And I knew I was going to regret it when I placed it. I told you that. I was like, I'm just going to regret this. What's wrong with me? Flew too close to the sun. Just sticking with the Bengals, man. It's the only team that I've consistently bet on this year that I haven't lost money on is the Bengals, because I waited a couple weeks knowing they were going to be bad. And I was like, all right, time for the Bengals to take off. And I bet on them each of the last 3 weeks and they've come through. That's a team you can bet on. I think the Ravens are probably in that territory now.
Yeah.
I feel pretty safe betting on the Ravens after another big win against an NFC team.
Yeah.
This is my lesson I've learned halfway through the season. Being that it is halfway through the season, Matt and I wanted to go through the major awards and pick our winners for the first 9 weeks. It's really, you play 18 weeks. Most teams have played 9 games. Some teams have had a bye, so they've only played 8. But we wanted to do our first half of the season awards today. But before we get there, I want to talk to the fans, the listeners of the show. I want you to reach out to us. You can either email us at fouledOutSports@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Twitter at fouledOutSports. I want to know what your worst fantasy sports experience was. Whether it's like a game, a season, a weekend. Because I think this past weekend was my worst fantasy sports experience in my life. I had 3 fantasy football teams lose. The 2 redrafts and then the 1 dynasty that you and I are doing together.
Yeah.
All lost. I had 2 fantasy basketball teams lose. Never had 2 before, but my nephew asked me to be in his league and that team lost. My fantasy hockey team lost. And to top that all off, anybody who's on any one of my fantasy teams is dropping like a fly right now. I started writing down all of the injuries that my fantasy teams have experienced over the last 4 weeks. And it's so bleak, I didn't know if I wanted to read it on the podcast. But I'll run through it quick for you guys. In football, Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles. Justin Fields dislocated his thumb. Kyron Williams had an ankle injury that took him to IR. Devon Achane had a knee injury that put him on IR. Josh Downs hurt his knee this week. That's all on one fantasy football team. My other fantasy football team, Dallas Goedert, fractured his forearm. Jamar Chase now has a back injury and is questionable for next week. In basketball, Devin Booker's got a calf strain. De'Aaron Fox has a sprained ankle. CJ McCollum's lung collapsed the other day. Devin Vassell has a groin injury. Jamal Murray pulled a hamstring. Bradley Beal hasn't played this season because he's got back spasms. And I got some hockey things going on too. I got a couple of guys on IR hurt on my hockey team. So I think if you're a pro athlete, this is your chance to reach out to me. Either Venmo me or Cash App me. And I will either 1, drop you from my fantasy team, or 2, I will not pick you up. I'll leave you alone if you're not owned in my league. That's
Good
it.
Lord.
Yeah, I'm going to blackmail Mike Evans because he's like the only guy on my fantasy football team who hasn't gotten hurt this season. Like, if you have Mike Evans on your fantasy team, you should trade him or drop him now because he's next, unless he Venmos me this weekend. Pay what you owe, Mike Evans. It's for your own good. It's bad. Everybody's hurt. I was 5-2. I was tied for first place. Now I'm 5-4. I got to survive like one more week, and then I get Devon Achane back, which is going to be like a godsend for me. But Matt, what was your worst fantasy experience ever? He said, knowingly.
D'Angelo Williams fucking garbage time comeback for you.
It's an annual tradition on this podcast that some point in the fantasy football season, when I'm feeling bad about myself, I make Matt talk about the D'Angelo Williams comeback game. It was Monday Night Football. I was down. What was I down? Like 27-28, something like that.
It was a lot. It was too much.
I was texting, and all I had was D'Angelo Williams. This is when Le'Veon Bell had his contract holdout with the Steelers, so Williams was starting for them. It was the first game of the season, I think. And I was texting you all day, like, this is going to happen. Hey, this is going to... And it happened. Like, late in the fourth, he scores his third touchdown of the game. That was Matt's. This weekend very well might have been mine. I don't think I've ever had 6 fantasy teams lose in the same weekend. I don't even think I've ever had 6 fantasy teams at the same time before. So this is pretty tough. But reach out to us. Send us an email, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter @fouledoutsports. I want to know what your worst fantasy experience was. To be clear, worst fantasy sports experience. I don't want to know what your worst fantasy experience was. And if you guys send them in, we'll read the best ones on the podcast next week.
If you just so happen to send in your worst fantasy experience and it's funny, we'll read that too.
Related story. I think it was last year or the year before in the fantasy football league we play in together. One of the guys, there's one guy in the league who was renowned for sending bad trades for years.
Yep.
I'm not naming names. I don't think he's in the league anymore, actually.
No, he's not.
He quit. But he would send like the worst trades you've ever seen. And for a while, he was trying to trade me a backup running back for one of my better players. And it was a dude who was a handcuff running back. So in the group chat that we're in with like people that are really more Matt's friends, he texted like, how do you guys feel about handcuffs? And I took it to mean handcuff running backs in fantasy. And I wrote this whole soliloquy about like how they're only valuable if someone gets hurt and they're really just jags and they're not important. And I was like pissed because he sent me the same trade like 4 times. And I was so annoyed. So I wrote like this whole like 4-paragraph text. And he's like, yeah, that's not what I was talking about. I meant like in the bedroom. And I was just like, oh. That was embarrassing.
Yeah.
So
that sums up this group.
Yeah. So worst fantasy sports experience, worst fantasy experience, whatever. Email it to us. We'll read them on the pod next week. On to week 9. Like I said, officially halfway through the regular season of the NFL. Matt and I are going to give out our midseason awards, starting with the MVP. And we didn't share these with each other. So when they're all the same, no, because that's what happens here. But I actually had the hardest time picking the midseason MVP out of any of these awards.
This was the one that I felt least confident in, but when I kind of took a step back and like looked at the numbers and then looked at like the situation that those guys are in, are they winning games, all that stuff, I didn't really feel like anyone else was like really challenging them for me personally. So I'm curious where you land on this, because you might feel radically different than I do.
Yeah, so I went through and looked at all the stats, and I looked at like team records, because MVP is typically a mixture of like team success and who the best quarterback was. It's always like who is the best quarterback on the best team
Yeah.
is pretty much what this award is for. And I think there's like this jumble of guys right now whose passing stats are very similar. You know,
Yep.
it's guys you would consider for the award. It's like Mahomes, Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, you know, Tua. Like they're all just kind of in the same area. So I looked at like Tua, who's leading the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns right now. And I was like, yeah, okay, statistically he's there. The team is 6-3. They're in first place in the AFC East, but they can't beat a good football team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they lose to the Chiefs in Germany. And like, it's funny because I said this on the podcast 2 weeks ago when they lost to the Eagles. I was like, this team cannot beat good football teams.
No.
I got so much shit for saying that.
How much longer does this go on before Mike McDaniel starts taking some of the heat? Like everyone loves him with what he's doing with the team's offense and all that. And he certainly deserves credit for that stuff. Like he's been incredibly innovative and he deserves praise for that. And like being innovative isn't the goal. Winning games is the goal. And he has not proven that he is able to do that against quality NFL teams.
I actually really think they miss Devon Achane right now. I mean, not as much as I miss him on my fantasy team, but they also miss him because like it just added such a dynamic weapon to their offense along with the other guys. And it's like the offense has been good again, like really good against bad teams, not great against good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like a big part of that is that like Tyreek Hill's been an absolute monster, but like Waddle hasn't been great. Mostert's gotten a lot of touchdowns and stuff, but like he hasn't like he's really slowed down the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean Mostert's still like what, third in the NFL in rushing yards, but like it's not necessarily about how many you get, it's also about when you get them. And yeah, he's fourth right now with 605. So like he's like statistically on a really, really good pace. But like, I don't know, outside of Tyreek Hill, I mean, that team isn't really producing offensively against some of the best teams. And the defense isn't able to get it done. They're not beating any of the better teams. So I think that automatically knocks Tua out of contention here.
Yeah, so I didn't pick Tua. I looked at, I think Mahomes is like the default answer for this in most cases. Like that's a safe pick. But I was like, you know, they're doing good. They're 7-2 through 9 games. He statistically is playing well, but not really up to his standards. You know, and it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's like too boring, but I didn't want to go that way. I looked at Lamar and I was like, man, like I think the Ravens might be the best team in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they 2 of the last 3 weeks, they dominated the Lions, they dominated the Seahawks on Sunday. But like Lamar has these games where he just doesn't really have to do anything. Like he didn't really do much on Sunday. He had 186 passing, 60 rushing, and no touchdowns, and they won 37-3. So I was just like, yeah. I was like, you know, I'm not going to fight people who want to pick any of these guys, but I was just kind of like, this isn't the first time we've seen it out of Lamar this season. Like he's had some big games, but also just had some games where it's like he didn't do anything and they won by 30 freaking points.
I think my counterpoint for that though too is like they don't necessarily like if you don't need to, then for me it's not a negative that you don't. Like we were saying with Miami, like the goal is to win games. And like if you need to kind of just like if all you need to do is like manage the game for your team to win, then like that's what a quarterback should do.
Yeah, it's just I think like this is where we start getting caught up in like semantics in the MVP argument. It's like, okay, is the team's success due to how good the quarterback's playing, or is like the team really good? And it's like you're splitting hairs, but um I ultimately went with Jalen Hurts for my midseason MVP. 22 total touchdowns between, I think he has like 15 passing and 7 rushing. The Eagles are 8-1. And but like I said, I'm not going to fight whoever you pick for the most part. If it's like one of these like top 5 to 6 quarterbacks, you know, I
Yeah.
looked at like Josh Allen too, because he's been phenomenal. And I feel like he
Hmm.
hasn't had a lot of help this season, but they're what, 5-3 now, 5-4. Yeah, 5-4.
Yep.
And I was like, I can't pick him when there's so many teams that are doing better than theirs.
So for me, the three that were like really in contention were Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. Those are the three that have, hey, their team is being successful enough for me to like really say that you're elevating them to a certain degree. Uh, and having the statistical production to really back up the idea of you being an MVP. Less so Lamar, but like I'm also gonna factor in like the fact that he's probably had like what 4 or 5 dropped touchdowns this year. So like I'm gonna give him a little bit of a break there. Uh the way his receivers were letting him down in the first like 3 to 4 weeks of the year was pretty fucking bad. But ultimately for me, when I looked at the numbers, looked at the team's records, and looked at the situations that each player is in, it just made the most sense for me that it's Patrick Mahomes. Because, yeah, like Travis Kelce is great, but like every team is also like game planning against Travis Kelce. And they don't like, yeah, they have Rashi Rice who like pops off for like 1 or 2 explosive plays a game, and they're not like Tyreek Hill explosive plays. They don't have anything outside of Kelce. I mean, the statistics about them not getting 20 plus yard passing plays since Tyreek Hill was traded is pretty insane. And to see Mahomes continue to operate at a pretty high level, yes, maybe not at the level that we're used to seeing of him. Yeah, it's just like the degree of difficulty that I think he is playing the game is every week is different than what those other two are facing just based off of like what they have around them.
That's fair. And that's kind of why I considered him too, is I'm like, okay, like his situation offensively is worse than, at least worse than Hurts. Like I think you can make an argument with Lamar. Lamar's being kind of similar
Yeah,
there, and he's still putting up a
yeah,
good season.
right. But then, there's the drawback of like, okay, well, Lamar also isn't producing like statistically on the same level. So that kind of like washes out.
Yeah, the Chiefs right now remind me of, there were teams during the Patriots dynasty where you just knew they weren't a Super Bowl winning Patriots team that
Yeah.
season. You're like, yeah, this team's going to be really good. They're going to win 12 to 14 games, but I don't really feel like they're a Super Bowl contender, which might seem like a stupid thing to say, but when you're as close to the team as I was for 20 years, you kind of knew. And that's how I feel about this Chiefs team, is that they're going to win 12 or more games. They're going to be one of the top seeds in the AFC, but I don't watch them and think like, man, this is a Super Bowl contender. I think this is a team right now that's getting wins in close games based on having the experience of like Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and really knowing how to win. But
Yeah.
like I look at their wins this season, it's like a couple of them are Jets by 3, Vikings by 7, Broncos 19-8. They have the loss to the Broncos. easily
Yeah.
could have lost that game in Germany to the Dolphins over the
Yeah.
weekend. I mean, they didn't, and that's saying something. But I don't
Yeah.
look at this Chiefs team and think like this is a team that's just like a big threat to win the Super Bowl. I mean, like they are because they're the Chiefs, but they would not be one of my top like 2 to 3 picks right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely not one of their best squads. And I do fully expect them to address the wide receiver talent position early and often in the draft.
It's funny because I say all this, but they're on a bye this week, and the Eagles are on a bye, and then they come back, and we have the Eagles at Kansas City on Monday Night Football in Week 11, and like that actually may go a long way to solving this debate between
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts and
right.
Patrick Mahomes, who's the MVP.
Yeah, I could be swayed either way. So
I know that's my thing is like if you pick Lamar or Mahomes or Hurts, I'm not going to fight you. If you pick Tua, I'm probably going to fight you right now until we see him beat a good team. But Miami's not going to have a chance to even beat a halfway decent team again until week 16 when they play the Dallas Cowboys. And it's the Dallas Cowboys. So, like, I don't know. Is it a halfway decent team? You never know with them. Next award is Offensive Player of the Year at the midway mark. I'll be interested to see how you feel about this one, too, because I looked at this and I was like, this is a 3-player race right now. It's Tyreek Hill, who's leading the league in receiving yards.
mm-hmm.
AJ Brown, who's right behind him.
Yep.
And then I have Christian McCaffrey up there with them right now as well. He's played one less game, but he's like 150 less total yards than those guys do when you add up his rushing and receiving. But he has 13 touchdowns in 8 games. And those other guys have like 8 and 6 right now. So he's got like 5 more touchdowns. But I feel like it has to be between one of those 3 guys if we're picking non-quarterbacks.
Yeah. So I have McCaffrey kind of in his own tier just below them. He is not considered for me. And that's not a slight against him. It's just the simple fact that like I look at what he's done this year and the impact that he's made for his team. And I look at what those other 2 have done for their team. And like AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill are like the lifeblood of those 2 teams, quite frankly. AJ Brown's broken Calvin Johnson's record for most games consecutively with 125 yards minimum, and he has definitely surpassed that number by quite a bit in a number of those games. Those 2 guys have just had so many games this year where they were absolute fucking cheat codes. The strategy for the team was just keep getting them the ball because nobody's stopping them. I considered AJ Brown because of the consistency with which he was able to string together games of recently. But ultimately, that little gap in touchdowns currently, I think, is giving Tyreek Hill the edge for me.
I think the crazy thing about Tyreek Hill is that, like you said, AJ Brown broke Calvin Johnson's record for most consecutive 125-yard games.
Yep.
He had 6 in a row. A lot of those games he was 150, 170, whatever.
Yep.
Tyreek Hill still has more receiving yards than he does.
I know.
Like, how? So you picked Hill. I actually did pick Christian McCaffrey. I feel like in a lot of ways that 49ers offense goes as he goes. And he scored a touchdown in every game this season for them, in multiple touchdowns in a lot of games. He's either just tied or broke the record for most consecutive games with a touchdown. And like I said, like
Yeah,
you're talking about a touchdown gap of 2 between Hill and Brown. Christian McCaffrey's got 5 more touchdowns than Tyreek Hill does, and he's played one
yeah,
less game. So
yeah. No, I hear that. For me, it's more about like the impact on the game when I watch them, and it's not that like Christian McCaffrey isn't impactful, but it's like shit. The Eagles have been giving up points left and right this year. They still only have one loss because like they can just keep going to AJ Brown and keep ahead on the scoreboard. Like it's just that impact on the game is more valuable to me than like the statistics. So
yeah, I kind of came into picking the award thinking I actually thought I was gonna go AJ Brown when I came into it
I
because I was like, man, he's had all these
I
125 plus yard
I'm slow
games.
like I'm slowly talking myself back into AJ Brown. But
Yeah, so
like
this is another one where like I wouldn't fight you if you picked Hill or Brown.
yeah,
For McCaffrey, what I do want to see though is that like we talked about the 49ers a lot last week and about how they'd lost 3 games in a row and the offense is kind of stalled in those games.
yeah.
His touches have gone down significantly from where they were at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, it's kind of a sign for me is like when he's not the workhorse of that offense, when they start splitting the carries or when they're like, oh yeah, we're going to put more on Brock Purdy, they
Yeah.
go from scoring 30 points a game to 17. Like he
Yeah.
had his first couple of games of the season, it's like 22 carries, 2018, 2019, plus, however many catches. And it's 30, 30, 30, 35, 42. And then it goes down to like 11 carries, 3 catches, 15 carries, 3 catches. And it's like 17 points. So I still think that he is the straw that stirs the drink in that offense. Like he's the focal point of that offense, but they need to get him going again. I think
Yeah.
if they put this carries limit on him, that they're playing with fire. But
Yeah, there was the Trent Williams injury too, which you could argue that Trent Williams is the straw that stirs the drink in that offense. So
the straw that stirs the drink in a lot of things. But can I tell you a funny story real quick before we go to the next award? I
yeah.
I was doing my research for this and I looked up total yardage leaders for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, yeah, Tyreek Hill has the most total yards. AJ Brown is second. And I expected this. I was like, okay, it's going to be like Hill, Brown, and CMC in some order. Guess who number 3 was? It's not Christian McCaffrey.
All right.
I'm going
Is
to tell
it
you, you're never going to get it.
is it a running back or a wide receiver?
It's a wide receiver.
God damn
You will never get it because the reason he's included is stupid. But I was like, I had to do a double take because I was like, no freaking way I didn't know this.
it. No clue.
It's Saints wide receiver Rashid Shaheed because they were counting return yards. So if you count return yards, he actually has over 1,000 total yards right now, which would put him third. But I had to do a double take because I was like, okay, Tyreek's got 1,000, AJ's got 1,000, and then it was like Rashid Shaheed 1,000 yards.
Number 1 overall, Danny Amendola.
That's what I thought of. Is I was like, Matt and I played in a fantasy league. We used to co-manage fantasy teams, and we won the championship like literally every single league we did that.
Yeah,
we stopped for some reason.
Because we hate ourselves.
But one league we were in counted return yards as points. You got like points per every 10 return yards. And Danny Amendola was the first overall pick in the draft because he was returning kicks for St. Louis at the time. The next one is where I feel like we stop having a debate about who would win it, and it stops being like you have choices here. Defensive player of the year. I will not listen to arguments that don't start and end with TJ Watt.
Yeah.
That's it. It's TJ Watt.
That's it.
Done. On to the next award. I do want to tell you, he is third in odds on FanDuel to win this award at the end of the season.
Yeah. Who do they have above him?
Chandler Parsons. Not it definitely is not Chandler Parsons. Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
And Myles Garrett. If they had
Yeah.
Chandler Parsons above him, we would have a major issue. Yeah, and I think like it's just the same thing with TJ Watt that we see every single year is that like Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons. It's funny because I usually say TJ Watt's name wrong.
Yeah.
Not other people, but they're flashier. They're like more athletic. They're,
Yep.
faster. They're all this stuff. But TJ Watt just like Pittsburgh is 29th in offensive yards per game. They're 31st in yards allowed per game. They've been outgained in every game this season, and they have a negative 30-point scoring differential. But they are 5-3, and they are in a playoff spot right now, halfway through the season. Almost 100% because they're +8 in turnover differential, which is tied for second.
Yeah. Taking part in like what, at least 5 separate turnovers this year.
We talk about him every week and about how like it's not just that he forces turnover. Like I think he's second in sacks behind Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, he's a half game, but a half sack behind Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, but it's not just like that he forces fumbles and gets pick sixes, and gets sacks. It's like the timing of these things.
Yeah,
and
it's literally the most important plays of the game.
It seems like every single time they win a game, it's because he made the play of the game. Tell me which team would be more impacted by losing their star non-quarterback than Pittsburgh losing TJ Watt.
Yeah.
He's the most important non-quarterback in the league.
I mean, how many wins down. If he doesn't play this year, how many wins do they have right now?
I legitimately think they could be 0-8.
Yeah. Like it's a real possibility because the offense has been that bad.
I wrote this down. He missed some games last year. They were 8-2 when he played. They were 1-6 when he didn't play. All 5 of their wins are by 1 score this season. And like we said, he made the key play probably in all 5 of those wins. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
I think if we went back and watched tape, that would be like 100% true.
Yeah, I have no doubt in that. So maybe they win 1 or 2 without him, but like I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that they're probably 0-8 without him. And it's like, look at this past week on Thursday Night Football. Oh, Minkah Fitzpatrick is hurt. He can't play. One of the best safeties in the league. Doesn't matter. They still beat the Titans.
Yeah.
They don't miss guys like they miss TJ Watt because they have TJ Watt.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So his brother, famously one of the best defensive players we've ever had the pleasure of watching. I mean, the dude had like multiple 20+ sack seasons. Has he met or surpassed that level? Like, I know like statistically he hasn't quite done the same as his brother, but like just watching the impact.
I would say peak, yes. I think like TJ Watt's peak, I think at this point has surpassed JJ Watt's.
Okay.
Just because of what we see in the last couple seasons. He tied the sack record while missing like 2 games.
Right.
He has all sorts of like forced fumbles. He's like, we said this earlier in the year, he's already Pittsburgh's all-time leading sack guy. JJ, it's like, I'm not saying he even passed JJ by that much because of how good JJ was.
Yeah.
For JJ, though, it's like the longevity is why it's not really a debate yet. And
yeah,
when TJ Watt just does this for a couple more years, I'm just going to be like, yeah, he's the greatest defensive player I've ever seen outside of Ray Lewis. It's probably like Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, TJ Watt for me right now. I mean, I'd like really have to sit down and think about it, but like I'm not old enough to have really watched Lawrence Taylor play.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of like what other guys had this type of impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we went like back to guys that were like playing and in their prime when we were like 3 or 4, sure, then like we could probably list some other guys, but like of the guys that we have like really gotten to watch without like having to go back and like watch tape through YouTube, like it's a very short list of guys that I would say I could put above him right now.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I think of guys that I would put up there on that short list. So like we're 33. Both of us are 33.
Yep.
So we're probably talking like 2000, 2001 and
Yeah.
on. So like Ray Lewis is my number one. He's always going to be my number one. And I think it's funny, like he's not brought up more in who's the greatest defensive player of all time debates.
Yeah. Because for me, like that's the only candidate.
It's like him and Lawrence Taylor should be the argument, I think.
Yeah.
But for like people we've watched, yeah, not like it's because it's impact too. It's like
Yeah.
quarterback of the defense, and so it's like him. It's Ed Reed. I was thinking Darrelle Revis is maybe someone
Yep.
that I would put up there.
Yeah.
Aaron Donald is up there.
Mm-hmm.
JJ Watt, TJ Watt. It's like it's hard to order them, but like, yeah, TJ Watt is on the short list of dudes who are, if I'm trying to figure out who the top 5 defensive players I've ever watched in my life are, his name comes to mind very quickly.
That Ray Lewis play where he knows where the run is going and just absolutely murders Darren Sproles in the backfield on like 4th and inches is just seared into my brain forever.
It's funny because Darren Sproles did so much great stuff in his career
Yeah.
in college and in the pros. And that's the thing I remember first when I remember Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
Like the first thing I think about.
Yeah. Like Darren Sproles was a great player. Like much better than like his overall stats would probably indicate. But like the the impact of Ray Lewis has soiled that.
Yeah, that's another thing I would like the fans to tell us because I'm sure that we're missing some people. So your homework assignment, fans, get in touch with us again. Email fouledoutsports@gmail.com, Twitter @fouledoutsports. Share your worst fantasy experiences, just regular fantasy or sports, and then tell us who the best defensive player you've ever watched is. And don't tell me it's Brian Urlacher. I watched Tom Brady juke that guy out of his shoes one time. not falling for Brian Urlacher over
I
here.
was waiting for that one to come.
I know. I have to mention anything because he is so good. Like Brian Urlacher was so great, but it's like,
Yeah.
I saw Tom Brady juke him. The next award, I feel like this isn't really much of a debate right now either. Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's kind of CJ Stroud and then everybody else right now.
Yeah.
I mean, on FanDuel, he's minus 550. The next highest is like Puka Nacua, who's really slowed down the last couple weeks, especially now that like Brett Ripien is throwing him the ball and it's not Matt Stafford.
Yeah, that'll do it.
CJ Stroud, 7th in the league in yards right now, 7th in passing touchdowns, coming off of a game on Sunday where he was just flat out phenomenal.
Yeah.
Set the rookie record for most passing yards with 470, throws 5 touchdowns, including the game-winning drive with no time left, essentially, throwing the game winner to Tank Dell. I think we're starting to transition from is he the rookie of the year to where is this season going to rank amongst the all-time great rookie quarterback seasons?
He's grown as a player and potentially as a human. You definitely saw in just like a handful of games in college when things weren't going great. Like he was not what you wanted, right? And it wasn't that he was necessarily the problem in that game, but then like doing the the classic like little Aaron Rodgers thing where I'm just gonna sit by myself on the bench. I'm not like rallying my guys or anything like that. Like that was who you saw CJ Stroud in those games.
Maybe the fact that he did that at Ohio State should have been like a green flag. Because
right?
he was just like, God, fuck Ryan Day. I hate this guy. I'm going to sit by myself. And we should have realized that that was actually a positive attribute, that he recognized that about his coach.
Right. But like, hey, he's had to take it on the chin a few times this season because, well, the Texans aren't going to win every game. Not even close to every game.
I mean, they've won half of them. They're 4-4 right now.
I mean, 50% is pretty far from 100%.
Yep.
So
it's about half, but it's a lot better than I thought they would be this season.
For sure. But he's like bounced back from it every time. And quite frankly, like even in the games that they've lost, like he's generally played pretty well. And I mean, 14-1 touchdown interception ratio. I can't really, I can't say that that's not great.
Yeah.
So
I thought this past week was especially outlined like everything that you just said, where they just kept going down to the Bucs.
Yeah.
It was very back and forth. It was like, okay, we're up, they're up 33-30 with 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
They blow that. The Bucs get a touchdown. He's got to go back down with like no time on the clock. He makes 2 massive throws to small Boi SZN, Tank Dell.
Yeah.
Gets the touchdown.
Yeah. If he hadn't missed games with injury, I'd be pounding the table for Tank Dell. But
can I throw out there that like
that dude has been incredible.
This is the downside of small Boi season, is that like Achane and Dell have been amazing, but they've both missed time because they are small boys.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to nominate Ravens running back Keaton Mitchell to be part of small Boi season. 5'8", 191 pounds. Got his probably his first action this weekend with the Ravens, because I think he's also been hurt this season. 9 carries, 138 yards. Balling out. Another small boy. Put him in the stable. But yeah, back to Stroud. You mentioned the 14-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Yeah.
He's played 8 games this season. He's on pace for 4,825 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, and 3 picks. Like, I don't think those totals are going to happen because the on pace thing was dramatically altered by his game against the Buccaneers this weekend.
Yeah.
But just like looking at what he's on pace for made me interested in going back and looking at like the best modern day rookie quarterback seasons. So I'm not going back to like Dan Marino and John Elway and those guys, but like just in like the last 20 years. Cam Newton, 4,757 total yards, 35 total touchdowns, but 17 picks. RG3, 4,015 total yards, so passing and rushing, 27 total TDs, only 5 picks, and was just like, that made me sad because he was absolutely electric and we lost him so quickly. And Justin Herbert, 4,336 pass yards, 31 pass TDs, both rookie records. And that's kind of what you're looking at now with Stroud. It's like, okay, can he beat Justin Herbert's records at this point? Like, how good is this season going to be when it's all said and done?
Very disappointed that we aren't getting any more Anthony Richardson this year, because I do think if he was healthy and like hadn't continually struggled to finish games because of health, could have at least at the end of the season made at least more of an interesting conversation about it. He was playing great. He's electric, like incredibly fun player to watch.
I think you're selling him short. I think if he had stayed healthy and hadn't missed so much, like he was already missing time with injuries before he got shut down. If he hadn't kept getting hurt, we could have had one of the best rookie of the year races that we've had in forever between these two guys.
That's very possible. I don't want to like go over the top and make it sound like I'm expecting him to also been in a 14-1 ratio situation.
No, but I think it would have been
Um,
more like he would have had, 20 passing touchdowns and like 13 rushing touchdowns.
yep.
And it would have
Yeah.
been like, oh, what's better? The CJ Stroud kind of more
Yeah.
pocket passer, or like this dude who was the whole offense in Indianapolis. Like it could have been a really fun thing to watch down to the stretch. And
Yep.
we lost that. And that's kind of a bummer. But
Yeah. And then the only other thing I'll say here is because this was a very easy decision on this one. I think the runner up on this though is very clear and very easy. It's Jordan Addison.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it
I
kind of
mean,
makes me very sad that we haven't even mentioned the name Bijan Robinson after how high I was on him.
yeah,
But
that's an Arthur Smith issue. But
Arthur Smith is not going to let that. Did you see the story about Arthur Smith shaving his mustache at 3 a.m. the other day?
yeah,
He's like, I couldn't sleep, so I shaved my mustache. I was like, maybe you should think about how to get Bijan Robinson more touches with goal to go, because he's only got 5 this season. He's like 4th on his own team in goal to go touches. I say it every week. Arthur Smith is a chode.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe don't draw up plays to have your backup tight end throw passes to your third string tight end while having your first string tight end block for your second string tight end. And also not have Bijan Robinson even on the field on that play.
Yeah. I think I was looking at the wide receiver thing and like how good Jordan Addison's been this season.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, maybe we just really, really overthought the wide receivers in this class. Because what they draft him like height, like 22, 23, something like that in that
Yeah.
area. And it's like, oh yeah, this dude literally won the Bolitnikoff at Pitt with Kenny
Yeah.
Pickett as his quarterback, and then went to USC and put up like another awesome statistical season.
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't know about Jordan Addison.
Yeah. He went to USC and I was like, oh, but like Caleb's throwing him the ball. So like no big deal. And it's like, yo, like when he was playing at Pitt, everyone was assuming he was going to be wide receiver one.
Yeah. I think Kenny Pickett owes quite a nice chunk of change to Jordan Addison for making him a first round draft pick as a quarterback, because he was amazing at both places. And that should have been a sign that he was going to be amazing more places.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
usually a pretty good sign.
yeah. The last thing on offensive rookies before we go to defensive rookies, I think Carolina fans are sitting there with a pit in their stomach right now. I said this in the open of this episode, but just like be patient. It's okay.
Yeah.
You don't, just because you're not awesome right away doesn't mean you suck. Like Bryce Young will be fine.
You know, we were talking in the MVP section about like the situation around the players, and look, the situation around Bryce Young isn't great, and he's trying to make the best of it right now. And
Can I tell you who should really feel like shit right now?
Reich,
Yeah, him too. But the Chicago Bears, because you had the first pick in the, like, I kind of forgot about this, but you had the first pick in the draft. You could have had Richardson or Stroud,
yeah,
or Bryce Young if that's what you wanted, and you traded that away and decided to roll with Fields again. And you're 2-7, and here we are. I mean, we'll see what happens, because they might get a really good pick out of that trade. And if they do end up getting like Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe it's worth it. But like, I wouldn't feel great if I was them.
I don't believe this will happen if the situation presents itself, but like imagine they get the first pick from Carolina, but they were able to like string just enough games together at the end of the year to be like, oh, like Justin's coming along. And then they trade the number 1 pick away again. And then Justin doesn't pan out.
Trade it to the Patriots. I still love Caleb Williams. I don't care what anybody says. He was awesome against Washington this weekend.
Yeah.
Alex Grinch let him down and finally got fired. Thank goodness. Defensive rookie of the year. We'll do this one quick because we got to go to our last segment. But
Yeah.
Defensive rookie of the year. FanDuel says that this is a closed case and that it's Jalen Carter. He's minus 380 on FanDuel. I would actually argue that this is the area where you can make the most money right now gambling on these awards.
Yeah.
I think Jalen Carter is like, he's probably my pick right now too, but it's mostly because like, I don't think that there's been a defensive rookie who's had like a super outsized statistical impact so far this season.
Yeah.
But I don't see this as like a close. I think like he's had the biggest impact and he's on the best team, but like the stats aren't otherworldly or anything like that. You're mostly relying on advanced stuff, which I'm good with, but I just think like if someone like Witherspoon or Will Anderson or Brian Branch or like someone puts together a couple really big games the second half of the season, that they could like easily take that top spot. Like I think minus 380 is way too much for Jalen Carter right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's been very good. Like I don't want to like pretend that he hasn't been. When I think about the whole advanced stats thing, is like, well, yeah, no wonder he's putting up, tons of pressures and has like a super high pass rush win rate. When you take a very talented physical specimen and plop them into a defensive line rotation that is already extremely loaded, they're getting one-on-ones all the time. This isn't like what Aiden Hutchinson faced last year when he was like, I think he literally led the league in double teams. So yeah, like he's doing very, very well, but he's also not my pick. My pick is Devin Witherspoon. And it's entirely possible that if Brian Branch hadn't gotten hurt and missed a couple games because he hasn't looked quite the same since he's come back from his injury, that it would have been Brian Branch. But I think both of these guys are people that you've seen, like, they are constantly making plays all the time. They're always where the ball is. They've literally both scored for their team, which I know, like, when you're talking about defensive players, like, that sounds super circumstantial, but we were talking about how big of a deal it was for the Chargers to have a special teams touchdown. Your defense scoring a touchdown is just as impactful. Like, that is a massive deal.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like if someone like Devin Witherspoon, like we talked about, he had that 2-sack, one interception game where he had the pick six.
Yep.
Earlier this season. Like I all I really think it's going to take is like one or two more games like that, or like not. It doesn't even have to be that big, but like just some games where one of these guys puts up some numbers, and all of a sudden they're going to be in the driver's seat. That's like I see why Jalen Carter is the favorite right now, but I don't think that anybody's really pulled away from the pack, and that it's like more narrative based that he's that far up there. I also want to give a quick shout out to my boy Tui Peloto, fifth in odds on FanDuel right now. One of my guys from the NFL draft, 2 sacks last night against the Jets, looking pretty good. It's funny, like you look at these lists halfway through the season, and it's just like a recap of our My Guys episode. It's like Devin Witherspoon, Brian Branch is up there, Tui Pelopo. Like I feel like people should pay attention to that podcast. It's a good episode every year.
We might know a thing or two.
Sometimes
it's funny because, like, at the time of the draft, my like initial stance at the end of last season of like, yeah, no, I'd take Brian Branch at 6 sounded absolutely insane. And like now, nope, I would still take him at 6.
No, it's like, yeah, that was the appropriate
Yeah,
term. It's
like
like he's that good.
him or Witherspoon, either one. Like, I'll take either one.
I know. Hey,
Um,
I'm not going to argue with you. Brian Branch was one of my guys. Love
yeah.
Brian Branch. All right, Bolds and Scolds, week 9 of the NFL season. I think you go first this week with your
Okay.
bowl. I don't know how we never know this because we go back and forth, but I'm just going to say it's you.
What, you want me to remember a whole thing?
You want me to do one whole thing? That's not fair. Who is your bold for week 9?
Joshua motherfucking Dobbs,
Mm.
the man, the myth, the legend. Oh God, but comes gets signed to the Cardinals a couple days before the season, largely held his own, and gets traded to the Vikings. Doesn't practice with the ones all weeks. Doesn't know half the players' goddamn names. Allegedly he doesn't know the playbook, but he's been in the NFL long enough that he kind of knows all the concepts. I'm not as worried about that. But like, dude has barely been with the team at all and goes out and wins them a fucking game. Like, and more importantly, like puts them in the 7 seed spot. They're a playoff team right now.
Yeah, just to clean up here, because I like even after this week, I still think there are some people who don't know who Josh Dobbs is.
Yeah.
He's a quarterback and he's an NFL journeyman who's played in like Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Cleveland, like, but as like a third string guy and like never really had a lot of success. Like Matt said, we talked about him last week because he was traded to the Vikings at the trade deadline on Tuesday. He doesn't practice with the ones. He doesn't know anybody's name that he's throwing the ball to, which is totally fair because I watched that game and KJ Osborne got hurt. And I was like, God, it's Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. And I don't know the rest of these guys' names either.
Yeah.
Like the guy who caught the game winning touchdown was Brian Powell. I was like, I have no idea who Brian Powell is. And I do a sports podcast. So
was it Brandon Powell?
Yeah. See, that's
Brandon.
That's the thing, because I don't even know his name well enough.
I only know his name because he was on the Lions practice squad for a couple of years.
Yeah. So see, that's like the type of guys he's throwing to. So I don't blame him. But he didn't even start. They start Jaron Hall, the 5th-round rookie out of BYU. Jaron Hall gets a concussion, and they're like, here comes Dobbs. He's been with the team for 3 days. He hasn't practiced. He doesn't know the plays, and he doesn't know anybody's name. And they still beat the Falcons.
Yeah. This is a huge red flag for Arthur Smith, but also it's just a major big dick move by Josh Dobbs.
It's not even that he beat the Falcons. It's like he played well.
Yeah.
He had like 180 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and another like 76 rushing and a touchdown. And down, what was it, like 24-21 with not that much time left. He gets the ball, drives them all the way down the field and throws the game-winning touchdown. Are you kidding me?
I don't want to like overstate what he's done this year prior to last week, but like he hasn't really been bad this year either. Like he has not been the problem for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah. Like this is where we're going with quarterbacks in the future, is this like your legs. If you're a quarterback who can move and pick up some yards on the ground and like convert that like 3rd and 5 by getting out of the pocket when there's pressure and do a lot of the stuff that he's able to do, that's extremely valuable. And it's like, no, he's not going to sit back in the pocket and pick people apart, but his mobility is a super valuable asset. And that's like what helped him on Sunday too, is that when he was pressured or when he didn't know where to go, he could get out, get a couple yards. He wasn't like taking sacks, stuff like that. My problem with this is that I just feel like at this point, we're just upping the ante for which quarterback can beat the Falcons every week. 2 weeks ago, it's a 2nd-round rookie who's afraid of milk making his NFL debut, beats the Falcons, Will Levis. This week, it's Josh Dobbs, who's been on the team for 3 days and doesn't know anybody's name. They play the Cardinals next week, and Kyler Murray's coming off of the IR. I'm assuming he's going to start. So next week, it's like a 5 foot tall quarterback who spent his whole rehab playing COD instead of studying that's going to beat them. And I'm like, great. Let's tune in 2 weeks when Johnny Rocket, the one-armed wonder, comes in for New Orleans and beats the Atlanta Falcons. Like, this is ridiculous. How do you lose this game if you're the Falcons? How do you lose to Josh Dobbs? He doesn't even know anybody's name on his own damn team. And he beats you. It's Arthur Smith is a chode. Chode coach. Hate Arthur Smith. I was so excited for the Falcons this season, and now I just feel like they're finding new lows. Like, I'm glad I'm not actually a Falcons fan.
I mean, if things don't turn around quick for them, he might not finish the season.
He shouldn't finish the weekend. Like, why is he going to coach on Sunday? My bold is another player that I am 99% sure that the majority of the listeners are not going to know. Dare Ogunbawale, the fourth string running back for the Houston Texans. Bold of the week. And there's a reason. I'm sure people are like, hey, isn't that the guy who was like a hot fantasy topic on the Bucks like 2 years ago because he was supposed to get the receiving work from Tom Brady? Yes, this is the same guy. That's where you know him from. But he's another guy who's been like an NFL journeyman. I think he's been in the league for like 6 or 7 years, and he's kind of always been a backup. Game tied 30-30 with 8 minutes and 50 seconds left. Houston has the ball, 4th and goal. Their kicker, Kai Fairbairn, is hurt. Can't come into the game. They send in the 4th string running back, Ogunbawale, to kick a 29-yard field goal to take the lead with 8 minutes and 50 seconds left. He drills it. Hits the 29-yarder, becoming the first non-kicker to make a field goal during a regular season NFL game since Wes Welker did it in 2004. So it's been about 20 years since a position player came in and hit a field goal. Coincidentally, Wes Welker's field goal was against the New England Patriots, and that game was a very large reason why Bill Belichick brought him over to the Patriots in 2007 when he got the chance, because he remembered Wes Welker playing all these different positions and kicking a field goal. So, but props to Ogunbawale just to like come in off the bench. He's obviously not a kicker and drill that. And the whole place went insane. And like, they don't win that game unless he hits that. So like, props to him, man. That was awesome.
Is there anything that fits the phrase of next man up better than that? Like,
it's funny because like you see it in baseball where like they bring in position pitchers or position players to pitch sometimes, but it's usually like when the game is already over, they're down by like 16 and they're like, okay, we don't want to burn any more arms out.
Yeah.
This was like if you brought like a second baseman in
right
during the 8th inning in a tied game and he like struck out the side or like got out of the inning without giving up any runs.
Yeah,
like,
or like
that's impressive.
You'll see it if it's like literally in the 17th or 18th inning, like something insane, right? But like, yeah, this is just, you don't see this ever.
Can I ask you a question?
No.
Okay. On to school.
No.
Why isn't the punter the backup kicker? Every sports video game I've ever played, my punter is my backup kicker. Like, why can't the punter kick? Is it like I don't understand that. Why did we have to bring in a 4th string running back to kick? And like, did they just like draw straws on the end, like the sideline, or did he have some experience?
So the only thing I can think of is like, you don't want to like fuck with their heads in any way, right? They clearly have a very set routine on how they do things because they do a very specific task. And I almost wonder if bringing them in to kick a field goal is just too different.
It's like too much glory for the punter and it goes to his head and he becomes like a egomaniac, and he's like, I'll never punt again. You like lose your punter that way. Who is your scold for week 9?
I think this is my weirdest one yet. I'm sure you had questions when I sent it to you.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to hear this because like I feel like these people deserve to be scolded, but I wasn't sure why in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah. So mine is like all the PFF guys.
It's just the whole website.
So like at least like the personalities. Although I think there's a lot of flaws with what they do in general, but um I was scrolling through Twitter. I refuse to use the other name. Um and I came across like 3 of them who all quote tweeted the same story. And the story was, I forget which running back it was, but they were getting fined for unnecessary roughness because they lowered their head and drove it into the defender. And they're all just basically like, oh, these guys can't even play football anymore. And I'm like, huh. This is the first time I've seen you guys comment on this. But you're only commenting on it now that an offensive player is being penalized for something that they definitely did. And I have seen multiple plays this year where a running back did just that and the defender got flagged anyways. So, like, yes, I am all for like taking the stance of being like, hey, we're kind of getting out of control with like the way we're doing things. We're making it so that guys are being penalized for not being able to like physically move themselves dramatically in one way or another at a split second. I get like all that's unreasonable, and I've certainly made my feelings on that known before. But like you're specifically focusing on this, and you have not mentioned it once all the times that a defender has been fined for this same thing.
That makes sense. When you told me you were scolding the PFF guys, I went to the website and I was like, they must have posted some kind of article about like the 13 worst Dan Campbell catchphrases or something like that that pissed Matt off because I was like, I don't know what they did. But my scold of the week is an actual football player. I'm scolding Tyreek Hill. Not for all the reasons he typically deserves to be scolded, but he played his first game against Kansas City this week after being traded to Miami a couple years ago, and told reporters before the game, I don't care where we play, the Chiefs are going to get this work, in parentheses. He also said that he had a special touchdown celebration planned for when he scored against the Chiefs. He was going to like point at Andy Reid and do something. He proceeded to have 8 catches for 62 yards and no touchdowns on Sunday, which is fine, but like definitely not up to his standards.
Yeah.
That alone does not qualify as the Chiefs getting this work from Tyreek Hill. They held him in check the whole day. But also, right before the half, the Dolphins are driving down, trying to cut into a 14-0 lead. Hill catches a screen pass and fumbles, and the fumble is taken back for a Chiefs touchdown to make it 21-0, essentially ending the game at that point. And like, yes, it's debatable if that was really a fumble. Like maybe it should have came back, but it's like, okay, so not only did you not give them that work, you had the game altering and ultimately game losing touchdown because the Dolphins almost came back but fell just short, like 21-14.
It's all a cover. He's actually a sleeper agent for them. So
yeah, probably. But yeah, it's just like, he talked about it like, oh yeah, it's going to be a big revenge game. I'm about to go off. Like, watch me do this. And it's like, you didn't really do much. And you turned the ball over and you kind of cost your team there. So like, yeah, scold for you, Tyreek Hill, outside of the normal reasons that I scold Tyreek Hill. This one's in-game related?
Generally speaking, giving your former team bulletin board material before the game, especially when that team's defensive coordinator is like easily one of the top 5 in the NFL, probably not the smartest move. I think if anyone in the NFL is going to know how to bottle up Tyreek Hill, it's Spagnuolo. And you just gave him extra motivation and made yourself look like a fucking dumbass, which is actually what you are. So it's fine.
Yeah, I just feel like it's funny. Like, I feel like revenge games in the NFL never really go the way that the player planned because the other team knows you so well. Like, I was just thinking about when Tom Brady came back to New England and I think they won like 15-10 or something, you know, and it was like Tom Brady didn't really have that great of a game. It was really emotional. Like, not really know if these really go the way guys plan. And like, I definitely wouldn't talk shit to the team that knows me better than anybody else does.
Yep.
So, but that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. And you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt, college football this weekend, Michigan versus Penn State. Very likely another game where Penn State's going to get blown out. That just seems to be what they do against good teams.
Just take the Michigan spread.
Yeah, Tennessee and Missouri could be fun. Ole Miss and Georgia at night will be a good game. And then another chance to see USC's defense let Caleb Williams down as they go to Oregon to take on Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks. So pretty fun day of college football. NBA's in full swing. We're 6 games into the season. NHL's going. Baseball's over. Congratulations to the Rangers on their World Series championship. I don't feel like anybody really cared about that much unless you're a Rangers fan. So, but that is it for us. We'll be back next week to talk about week 10 of the NFL season. Tough slate for the NFL this week. Have you seen the primetime games?
I feel like I need to look now.
Ooh, Thursday night, Panthers at Bears.
Oh, God.
Sunday morning, Germany game, Colts and Patriots. Sunday night, primetime, Jets at Raiders. Monday night, Broncos at Bills. You can skip those. Luckily, there's some fun games during the day on Sunday, but Kansas City, Miami, and Philly are all on bye week this week. So, like, they should not let those teams take a bye week at the same time.
Yeah.
Bad idea. But
just the fuck are you? Well, here's the thing. Like, the NFL never uses the flex schedule thing when they need to use it.
It's funny because they installed it for like early in the season. Now, like, they can start doing it at like week 4 or 5.
Yeah.
They won't do it until like week 16.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you could probably put like Lions Chargers as our Sunday night game. You got 49ers and Jags, Texans and Bengals might be fun. But like, what they would probably do if they did flex it is put Giants Cowboys in the Sunday night slot. So like, I'm fine with them just keeping it where it is, and I can just go to bed early. So, well, all right, my friend, I will talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
Robin.